Shalom and welcome to a special broadcast from here, the center of burnt cars and vehicles from October 7th. We're here in a special broadcast together with the Israel Government Tourist Cooperation and the Ministry of Heritage. And we are here today on the day of Tu B'Shvat, talking about October 7th and mainly talking about how we as a nation continue and we are flourishing as a nation. I want to say shalom to Rabbi David Fendel, head Rosh Yeshivat Sderot. Shalom.
Tu B'Shvat Sameach.
Tu B'Shvat Sameach. And we'll talk about this, the Sameach. The question is, how do we say Sameach and happiness during these days in this place? But first of all, please, a few words really about October 7th. As you experienced in your yeshiva, the terrorists came in. It was Simchat Torah, the day of celebration. Such an important day, such a holy day. When did you understand how terrible this day was?
It really was a very tragic day, but our experience at the Max and Schwartz Hesder Yeshiva was really an experience of a lot of heroism. Gone are the days that yeshiva boys don't know how to fight back, and our guys right away ran down. People tried to stop them. They said, "They're terrorists. Where are you guys going?" They said, "That's why we're running." And they sought combat. They were able to kill 3 terrorists right at the beginning.
Wow.
And the rest of the day was a day of trying to give and help. And we didn't really experience how tragic the day was. I think from a perspective of a year and a half, we see that it was a game changer. We see that we were really an existential threat to the whole survival of the state of Israel.
Now really, you became some sort of a center for assistance also spiritually speaking, and also really helping the residents of Sderot, your neighbors. How much was that part of your activity throughout the months after October 7th?
Well, the terrorists dressed up as soldiers and as policemen and laymen, but they didn't know how to dress up as yeshiva guys with tzitzis out. So when people would see us throughout the town, they knew they were okay. They felt protected. And in terms of the days after, because we know that many were, the city was evacuated, but the yeshiva. So we anyway had to leave for Bein Hazmanim, but of course everybody had to leave. There were terrorists. I didn't even know it till a week ago that there were terrorists all around. They were waiting. There were about 10 different groups of 2 terrorists at a time, and they were waiting to. And fortunately, that was all thwarted. But I was trying to say that on a national level, we don't realize what a day of salvation that was. Because now I take people up to see the Gaza Strip, and there's no Gaza Strip. There's nothing left. And in Lebanon... We'll talk about really the next stages. I want to say also shalom to Dr. Gedalia Fendel, Rabbi Fendel's son. You are a resident of Shuva. And also with you, I'd like to begin our discussion from that day, October 7th.
Okay, so first I want to start, congratulations. It's the first time I'm being interviewed together with my father.
It's about time.
It's a big privilege for me, and hope. So yeah, I live here in Shuva in Gaza Envelope, and we went through that tragic day, which it started as a normal day. You told my father that we became a place of spiritual, and it's not true. 20 years. 20 years.
That's true.
But probably it had to be a much more tragic day for people to open their eyes and see. For 20 years to live in Sderot, under the missiles. And, we don't know. If somebody asked me, do you feel safer now after the... We don't have that concept of safe. I don't know what safety means. It's not the same thing like when somebody feels safe abroad. We here were brought up that it's normal.
It's our home.
It's normal. No, it's our home. That's for sure. But it's normal to have missiles over your head. But that day was much. But that day was more and more tragic. And basically, I remember the first moments of how scared we were. But right away, I had the privilege to come out of the house, leave my family alone, which wasn't easy, in the shelter.
Because you're
I'm a doctor, and my wife is the one to remind me, you're a doctor, find out who could you go help.
Wow.
And I joined the first responders, even though I have no weapon. We have no weapons almost. It was only 3 pistols, 1 gun. And later on, we opened up a spontaneous field hospital for a lot of soldiers and later citizens that came. It became very, very big.
Now, I understand that to your home came 2 young children who were hiding in a closet in their home. Their parents were killed. What can you tell us about that?
So I'll just say, first of all, that the kids are among other people that came. What happened was, to this field hospital, later on in the day, started coming people that were healthy. And I had a problem because I had nothing to do with them. I'm a doctor. Either you're injured. And then I said...
They were traumatized.
They were traumatized, but they had no physical injury. So that point, I called up my wife and I said, I'm sending you, in the beginning, I'm sending you an elderly couple in their 70s.
Oh,
Good
wow.
luck. After that, a pregnant woman, 41 plus 3, which it was a very hard decision to send her to my house. They all wanted to go to the hospital. I told her, you need a chocolate, a good shower, and to
You
rest.
also heard what was going on in the hospitals, right?
Right. And she said later on, she said, you saved me twice. Also from what I would have seen,
Wow.
3 times. Also twice. Also from what I would see there, and also spiritually. She comes from the kibbutzim, and on the 6th of October, nobody knew where this country going to. It was a lot of protesting.
Days of crisis.
And she says, you saved it. And every time I again become pessimistic about Israel and what are we doing here, I remember what I saw in your house, and I get optimistic. And then also come these 2 kids. And about that, I want to say one word. These 2 kids, it was a very big privilege for us to have them. Very hard scenes. Amalia, a 6-year-old kid that comes all with blood all around of her mother. Michael, 9. These 2 kids saw the parents killed in front of them. They saw their daughter, their younger sister, was killed too. And that's what I announced when I brought them to the house. Luckily, Abigail, she was released in the first agreement there was, a 4-year-old. And even though they came in with this terrible scenes and terrible stories that even my 4.5-year-old had to hear.
Because they started talking there.
They
That's
started
very interesting,
talking.
because we know that it takes time to process. But actually, at the beginning, right away after it happened, they were talking.
Right away, they were talking. They did not understand how bad and what exactly happened. In fact, first of all, for a couple of months later, it happened that they didn't speak. But in fact, the first time they came to the junction, and I asked them if everything's okay, if they're hurt, because I saw blood. And they say, we're not hurt. And listen to this. This is the first time, until today, the only time, that I had tears in my eyes. And I asked them, so how could I help you? And they say, we're hungry. Wow. So I say, you didn't eat supper? So they said, we didn't eat supper. Our parents, both dead, and we don't know how to cook.
They said it.
And usually, when there are missiles, so we go to our grandparents, but our parents died, and we don't know how to drive.
Wow. Rabbi Fendel, we're using this microphone. You know what I want to ask you? You're talking to you as Rosh Yeshiva, but I want to ask you as a father. First of all, when do you understand that this is what's going on at your son's home? And looking at your son here, what he experienced, what we all experienced, but it's your son.
That's a bad question.
That's the question.
We still don't know exactly what happened. It's awesome. We're very proud. And unfortunately, we were totally involved in what's happening in Sderot. And we were thankful that no terrorists came to Shuva. We didn't hear anything more than that. We didn't realize that he really was saving people. And the real threat was that it's miraculous that they didn't enter Shuva. And they were able to stop them.
Now, so we look at the day, October 7th, as a day of a tragedy, as a day of a terrible, horrendous attack, murderous attack. But we also look at the war, and we also look at the soldiers. And you, from your yeshiva, you know many soldiers, and we have those who paid the terrible price. So how do you look at the past year and a half, looking at it all, at the big picture?
The big picture, we're very, very optimistic, and I think we're realistic. Who would have imagined that we'd be in the Hermon of Syria without one soldier even being scratched? Who would imagine that the Hezbollah, that was even more threatening and more we were much more afraid of the Hezbollah than the Gaza Strip.
Right.
Who would imagine that they'd be almost neutralized? Who would imagine that the Gaza Strip would be in total ruins? Who would imagine that we're almost a superpower from an existential threat? So I think we all have to take a step backwards and say, wow, awesome things are happening, great things are happening, and we now just have to keep up with the pace and make sure that we're strong and that we finish the job.
One thing that people are feeling is that on October 8th, 9th, 10th, maybe a month or two after, there was a feeling of true unity. And nowadays, people are afraid that it might be, going away. We have to hold on to it. How do we do that?
So first of all, we definitely have to all work on it. And we have to respect people that don't agree with us. And we have to realize that we're here together. But I think it's a misconception. I think it's an illusion. I think when you go out to... Moshe Rabbeinu even said that, what could I do with these people? They're going to stone me. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God answered and said, meet them. Go out to them. If you contact the people and you begin to know them, you'll see that we have so much in common. And there's a beautiful spirit in this country. The press and the media doesn't let us hear it. They're involved almost like a one-track mind to the feelings of every last hostage, and it's totally disproportional because awesome things are happening in this country.
Dr. Gedalia Fendel, you wanted to
I just want to add to this. I'm going to tell a story that it'll really
put things into proportions.
It'll really touch everybody.
Okay.
This is a story that happens to a Haredi guy, Hatzala Lelo Gvulot. He's a medic. He comes over to our junction, and there's a very injured guy that we even thought maybe to intubate him. That's how injured he was. He came from Kfar Aza, a young guy, and Aryeh is leaning down to take care of him. And as he's leaning down, with the last power that this young guy had, he picked up his mouth to Aryeh's ear and said, "I'm sorry." And Aryeh said, "What are you sorry about?" And he says, "Yesterday, I hated you." And that's the big difference that happened that day. But that's not what they're going to show on TV because there's no rating for good stuff.
But now we're on Tu B'Shvat. And you, Dr. Gedalia Fendel, and you, Rabbi Fendel, with your yeshiva, are focusing on the good and focusing on planting, and not just planting the trees, but planting our souls. But actually, a special initiative that you're telling us about is about trees, but again, through the positive attitude, the positive overlook.
Yes. So first of all, this is the time to say Tu B'Shvat Sameach.
Tu B'Shvat Sameach.
And I do give tours down south, and I always say I'm not giving a test tour. We're not Poland, we're not Varsha. I want to talk here about spirit. I want to talk here about hope and how Israel is our strength that we have here. And that's what we should focus on. And out of that, and also my 12-year-old kid thought about this idea, and we built it into a much bigger idea. We're planting an edible forest that's called Revival Forest, and it's revival. Usually everybody comes here to Forest of the Fallen, and this is a revival forest where we're going to tell the stories of the fallen, their heroism stories, and we're going to tell also heroism stories of people that didn't fall that day, but they did a lot of stuff. We're going to tell stories of miracles. We're going to tell stories about doing on that day. These are stuff that there's no such thing like that in Israel. And in fact, we just an hour ago released this campaign of getting money and donators, and and hopefully this will be very, very powerful. It's already starting tomorrow. Whoever wants, tomorrow we're having I call it the Netiyat Etzpina. So tomorrow we're planting a very old olive tree. It's going to be a nice ceremony. Everybody's invited down South Shuva. And you said trees on Tu B'Shvat. Trees is the first mitzvah that we were told as a nation when we come into Israel. Venatata kol etz ma'achal. And not for no reason.
Trees.
Edible trees. Not for no reason. Trees is settling. Trees means we're here. And only
it means that we have roots.
And it's more important in Gaza envelope to say, you thought you were kicking us out of here? You thought you're burning down everything? No, we're planting. We're here to stay for the next generations.
With strong roots. Rabbi David Fendel, Dr. Gedalia Fendel, thank you much, and we'd like to end with your message to our viewers on this day of Tu B'Shvat, please, Rabbi.
First of all, I'm planning to give some money also. I think it's such a beautiful project to think of the whole concept of something that's living and something that's going to, for generations, outlive all of us. And that spirit is something very special. We also, at the Maximum Schwartz Hesder Yeshiva, are building and growing and believe in revival and believe in learning and teaching all the beautiful heroism that we experienced and we're all part of in this unbelievable year and a half.
I want to say only, first of all, there's no doubt of it that my grandchild and also me, we got all of this from my father. And I want to say that these 20 years, people thought that Sderot is going down after missiles. And my father, with the yeshiva, only building, only continuing. And today Sderot is one of the best cities. And that's how we work. That's how we work.
Rabbi Fendel, Dr. Gedalia Fendel, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
We're continuing our broadcast now, and I'd like to invite to the stage Dovi Meisel, Vice President of Operations at United Hatzalah, who was there from the beginning, October 7th, following the operations of United Hatzalah, of the emergency teams in this tragic day. But also we're going to talk about the revival, of course. Let's make sure the right microphone. Is this the right microphone?
Yeah, we're good.
Right.
All right.
Dovi Meisel, shalom.
Shalom, shalom. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you so much for being with us. And we're going to talk about revival, but I do want to begin with October 7th because this story for you it's the story of our nation, but I think your story, as we look at the timeline, is the story of our nation. Tell us about October 7th, how you experienced it.
So, personally, October 7th, Simchat Torah, for me was supposed to be a very, very special day. We were actually very excited and afraid by my parents preparing for my son's bar mitzvah, which was supposed to be on Simchat Torah. And at 6:29 in the morning, the world turned upside down.
Oh, and it took time till you and many understood how upset.
Yeah, I mean, not that long, but you know, unfortunately here in Israel, we're all too experienced with, you know, air raid sirens, and, you know, we're thinking, okay, something's going on. The radio goes off, the communication starts saying, okay, there are missile attacks, whatever. And we're like, okay, I like to tell my wife, it's all right, you know, we'll give it an hour, everything will be back to normal. We're used to this, but not. It really, it started escalating and escalating. And essentially at, I think it was 6:59 in the morning. I'm losing my kippah here. At 6:59 in the morning is when it registered. That this is not anything that we were ready for or experienced. When just looking at the burnt vehicles, these piles, is that call that we got at 6:59 in the morning saying that there was a massive car pile up in Mefalsim Junction.
At the beginning, you thought it was a car accident, a terrible car accident.
But I'm thinking to myself, 6:59 in the morning, Shabbat, very untypical. Doesn't make sense. And then dispatch comes over on the phone and saying that they can hear gunshots in the background, and that's when we understand this is not your typical missile attack from Gaza.
Now, one of the big challenges is, of course, you're sending off your ambulances really to the field, and then you understand that there's a question if they can go in because it's dangerous. The fighting, the shooting is happening.
So the basic rule of emergency medical services is safety first. You don't go into a hot zone. And we're well experienced with this, even in the terror attacks. You know, we're together with police, we're together with army or whatever, and we're secured, except here it was very, very different. And I think for me personally, I mean, being in this field for 35 years and been through hundreds of terror attacks, nothing ever put us in a position where we needed to make such a tough decision. And that was having hundreds of people calling dispatch, you know, bleeding out in Kfar Aza, in Be'eri, in Yachini, in Sderot, in Ofakim. And there's
bleeding and also saying no one's here. No one's
and
coming.
There is no help. And our volunteers are behind the lines by Cheletz Junction on Route 232. And I had to make that most difficult decision I ever made in my whole life. And that was, I'm not going to force anyone to go in and put themselves in harm's way, but anyone who's willing to, I'm willing to back that decision and knowingly agree to them going in under fire because we simply understand. I remember the argument we had at headquarters. I had my head of operations and medical division arguing me, saying, we don't do this. We don't go in live fire area. And I'm like, what would you do? Look at this. We know what's going on. We're getting the calls. We have the videos on the app from people calling in when dispatch is instructing them how to improvise tourniquets. What would you do? Would you go in? Would you go in? And they all say, I said, this is our DNA.
Now, we hear from your people stories about miracles because they went in under fire.
Endless.
They came out.
Endless miracles. I was actually quoted. I don't remember personally saying this, but my the head of the medical division, Elad, he tells me, Dovi, when we were debriefing today, he said, you said when you made that decision, I know we are going to need to go to families of some of these volunteers and tell them what heroes they were, because I was sure that they were going to get killed. But the stories that we got, seeing it live, of ambulances being shot at, volunteers seeing terrorists oncoming head on, in their face, shooting at them, RPGs, and yet, miraculously, I say it was angels that came down on that day, angels that came down on that day to protect these heroes. None of them were killed on this day.
And they saved lives.
They saved over 1,000 lives. The bottom line is that if not for the over 1,000 volunteers that went in on October 7th and 8th and treated and saved the lives of these people, that simply there was no other help there, the numbers wouldn't have been 1,200.
Dovi, we're a year and a half after. How are you doing? How are your people doing?
I think, wow, that I think is the hardest question. It's an ongoing battle, not only in the front lines with Hamas and in Lebanon and the other fronts, but after experiencing October 7th, seeing the atrocities and the volunteers going through unimaginable sites that can't be unseen, undergoing therapy. We're looking forward. We're looking forward into the future, but it's an ongoing challenge. There's no question.
Now, we're talking about revival. And as a person who is in touch also with communities around the world, you see different things throughout this year and a half. You've learned things about our nation here in Israel and about our nation around the world. Share with us your feelings, especially on this day of Tu B'Shvat.
So, Tu B'Shvat represents the growth, planting trees that will be there for decades to come. Looking back at October 6th, if you look at the Jews of the diaspora and the Jews in Israel, it was two different worlds. October 7th, I think, created a situation that brought Jews all over the world out from hiding. Some of them because they were forced because of anti-Semitic attacks, and some of them because they're proud and connect to what was happening here, and to see the unity of the Jewish diaspora all over the world coming together with what's happening here in Israel, to see our what's the word for it, our shared destiny as a nation, I think is an opportunity that has disappeared for many, many years. Wow. And suddenly now we see unity that was not here on October 6th, not only here in Israel, but also throughout the world.
And we have a mission to hold on to it.
We have to. Because if there's one thing that will make us win, is the unity.
That's true victory.
That is. Ke'ish echad belev echad, together.
Dovi Maisel, VP of Operations at United Hatzalah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Yoni.
Okay, we're continuing our broadcast from here to talk a bit about this place, the uniqueness, the significance, the message of this place, and I'd like to call upon Captain in Reserves Adam Itach. He's the spokesman of the Home Front Command, Southern District, and he's been here for, we'll hear in a moment how many days. Adam, thank you very much for joining us. Have a seat, take a microphone, this one. First of all, thank you very much for hosting us here, because you are one of the people who've been here for how many days already?
Well, I took over 450 days in reserve service.
450 days.
Just quite a few days over, and I'm doing here a day here and day there now.
So tell us really about this place, because it began as a practical solution for this important mission, because we know what happened in the streets of southern Israel. There were cars and vehicles throughout the streets really were shot upon. There were people who were killed in these cars, and there was, first of all, we needed a solution where to put these cars together and start working on them and to see what's going on.
Yeah, exactly. So October 8th, all of those vehicles that you see, this wall behind me of iron, steel, and rust, all of those vehicles were actually spread in the roads, in the communities, near Oz, Be'eri, Kfar Aza, pretty much everywhere. Half of those, about 800 of those vehicles were in Nova Festival. And we had to gather all those vehicles and get them somewhere. So pretty quickly, we asked Tekuma, the community, to loan us what used to be a wheat field, this wheat field. And they do, and then we start to collect those vehicles from all those roads. And just like you said, those vehicles were, this was the condition of many of the vehicles. Some of the vehicles were shot at, and those vehicles were actually burned, deliberately burned by Hamas terrorists.
When did you and others understand that it's not only this practical solution, rather we're talking here about a monument, a collection of cars and vehicles that tell our story and will continue to tell our story?
So I think the way you described it, the collection of vehicles, is a good way to describe it. The first time that I come here is when I understand that my district is busy with this mission, with this task. And again, it's just a wheat field. It's an open wheat field. I park my car outside, and I see, I look inside, and I see a group of people, reservists. And they were wearing blue aprons, and they carried those big industrial vacuum cleaners.
Wow.
And what they did was to vacuum all the ash from those vehicles, from those cars.
We have to also explain for those who aren't familiar, it's not just vacuuming, it's the people sometimes of Zaka and of the Rabbanut of the army, because it's a holy mission of making sure that anything of anyone is dealt with and buried.
So, obviously in the Judaism it is a sacred mission, but there is also a moral point of view for that, because as a military and as a country, we failed on October 7th. We failed to protect those people. And the one thing that we could have done was to make sure that we bring everybody to burial in the proper way. And we found some findings that through DNA testing, we actually were able to identify a lot of some of our missing people. That's
important to mention. You were saying that some of what happened here helped understand what happened to people who were missing at some point.
Yeah, at some point we found some human remains of people that were still identified. The ambulance is a good example for it.
Right.
There's human remains that were found in the ambulance that belonged to people that for quite some time we didn't know, or we suspected that they might have been kidnapped.
Okay, so again, you're going through the people are cleaning the sacred mission, but when does it become a mission also of telling the story?
So I was just starting to say that when I came in and look inside and see the guys doing what they were doing, it took me about 5 minutes to leave my car and go inside.
Wow.
And then I took to Yaniv, Major Yaniv, who was the Rebbe, was the commander of that task. Turned out that we're from the same city, even pray in the same synagogue, and we talked. And he told me what was the purpose of this mission. And once I understood the purpose of this mission, for me it was automatically like something was like, the world has to see this. The world has to see this, because when you see those burned vehicles that were lined here, there was like dozens and dozens of lines of vehicles, almost 300 vehicles. You see the magnitude of the evil that we're facing as a nation. And then you see our people diving into the ash in order to try and bring some findings, in order to do this holy sacred task that you just talked about. And then you look again and you see who's our enemies who tried to burn us, who did everything in their power. They shoved tires and they torched those tires in order to get this condition of the vehicles like you see them now, and they did it intentionally because they had a message. And once I understood what was their message and what is our message, we started to bring media here from all around the world and delegations from all around the world. I think that there is maybe not even a single country who sent some representatives here, maybe just a few, but people from all around the world started to get here, and we understood that there's something important here that is a piece of the puzzle that has to remain as a place that people come here for outreaching and heritage, and this place has to stay. And happy. I'm glad that they did.
Now it's also about the magnitude, but it's also about a story. Every car has a story, and you focus, of course, on the stories that you can understand and tell the whole story. So just give us an example of the cars that we're seeing here, one or two, that tell a story.
So there are so many. It's really hard to, with respect to everybody. You said each and every car is a story, and let me tell you, it's a story from hell. It's a story of a family. It's a story of a group of friends. It's a story of a couple.
I understand that once you had a story that you understood about a car, and then suddenly a family member came and you understood differently.
Yeah, and it was the story of this vehicle, of this Audi, that black Audi that on October 7th, I was right here. I was telling the story of this vehicle, and what I knew was that there were 4 family members that were killed. There was a baby seat in this vehicle prior to that. And as I was telling the story, even after I investigated to learn all the facts and where this vehicle was signed under the name of a company, but I couldn't get to the right details of who was the person who owned the vehicle. And on October 7th, when I'm here with a German journalist, and I'm telling the story of the vehicles, all of a sudden a person turned around. He was right next to me, and then he tells me, "This is my vehicle." And I tell him, "What are you saying?" And he told me it was exactly the way you described it, but I was in the car and I managed to escape.
I survived.
Wow. Yeah. And it took me a moment to understand what it is that he's talking about, and I turned to him and I just hugged him.
Wow.
Because it was a moment where all of a sudden it's like a person came back from the dead, and it was like a Jewish soul that came back to us, because I knew that there were 4 people who lost their life in this vehicle, and now there's one that's alive who survived to tell the story of his family members. 3 of his family members were murdered in this vehicle.
You also made the decision to have here also vehicles that belong to the enemy.
Yes. There was a debate whether or not we should keep them here or not, because of the feelings that it may arouse in people who come here. But the decision to keep them here is for the doubters who come here. You see only a couple here. There's this Dodge Ram and this Isuzu D-Max, and you can see how those were turned to war machines by Hamas terrorists. And there's a small example of the motorcycles. But on the back, there's a couple hundreds of motorcycles and about 30 of those pickup trucks that were used in order to slaughter our people on October 7th. And the reason why they're here is for people to see that evil, for them to see the effort that our enemies took in order to try and just wipe us off the earth that day.
Now we're talking on Tu B'Shvat, and this day is a day of revival, and that's what we're focusing on today. And another interesting decision that you made here is to have a tractor, one of the farmers' tractors here. The tractor, I understand, was stolen. They tried to take it back to Gaza, but that's also part of the message, as I understand here.
Yeah,
it's about revival. This was a wheat field, and we will plant, we will grow.
Well, the fact about this tractor, this orange tractor, and it's hard to miss when you walk in and you see that. I think that we brought it back because we keep what's ours. There's a lot of property that we found, that our soldiers found while operating in Gaza. It was laptops, cell phones, credit cards, even pins, soldiers' pins, everything that we suspected that is like in Israeli equipment we brought back. And that tractor that belongs to, it's a symbol of agriculture and belongs to one of the communities that's surrounding here. Actually, now seeing it here in Tu B'Shvat, it's a great symbol that you cannot unroot the Jewish people from their land. We're here to stay.
Okay, we are indeed here to stay. Captain Reserves Adam Itach, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck.
My pleasure.
Okay, we're going to continue now, and we'll go over to the Israeli police. And I wanted to invite here to our stage, to our special studio, Dean Elsdon, international spokesperson of the Israeli police. As we know, the police was very, very active on October 7th and is continuing to be a central part of the defense, of the security here in the state of Israel, inside the communities around. And we're here with Dean. Shalom. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here on this day of Tu B'Shvat. And we'll be talking also about revival. But I do want to begin with you as well. October 7th, the Israeli police were really on the forefront in this war for sure on that first terrible day, right?
Yeah, not even that day itself, but the days following. I mean, everybody has their story of October 7th, the Hamas-led massacre that took place that day. But the Israel police, when you think of this agency, they were the bulletproof vest of our country, of our nation. They were the first people that were down there, down in the south, fighting the terrorists. They were the officers who were identifying the victims as they were coming into Shura. That base was split up between the IDF and the police. IDF was identifying soldiers. The Israel police was the agency that was responsible for identifying victims. And the trucks were nonstop coming in. You had officers that were coming from their house. I want to remind you that on that day, we also didn't even know if it was going to also hit Jerusalem, if it was going to hit Tel Aviv. But because of the officers, because of the sharp and fast thinking of the commanders in the police, at 6:51 in the morning, the Southern District was shut down with a police order. There were checkpoints set up, and only emergency personnel and people that were coming in to help were allowed to go in to the Southern District, and only civilians that were passing the police checkpoints were allowed to go out to make sure that the terrorists couldn't go any further.
Now, a few words about what happened in Sderot, because we know that Sderot, there was a big tragedy. There was very difficult fighting at the police station. But many people we talked to in Sderot say because of that, because the fact that they were fighting, there was fighting between the terrorists and the police of Sderot, and really the base there was demolished, practically speaking. That saved the residents of Sderot because the terrorists were busy with our brave police officers instead of going from house to house like we saw in the kibbutzim.
Yep, and we can talk a little bit about Sderot and the heroism of the police officers. The first police officer to fall in the line of duty in Sderot at the police station was actually Eliyahu Haru, Zichron Lebracha. I met his wife, who's a widow now to 3 young girls. She chose to follow in his footsteps, and she's actually a police investigator in the Netivot station. She specifically deals with sexual violence in the region, and that just goes to speak to the identity and DNA, how proud she was of him to want to follow in his footsteps. But it wasn't just Sderot, where the police officers were holding down, like you said, the battle so that the terrorists couldn't go down the street where there was a religious girls' school. And the girls were there. It was Simchat Torah. There were girls inside the school. It would have been terrible. Wow. I couldn't even imagine. We've heard the crazy stories. But to think of the stories that could have happened had it not been the quick reaction of the police officers, we could talk about Kfar Aza, where Keter Tzuran came from his house, got on his motorcycle, and with a handgun, he was shooting terrorists along the way that were armed with AK-47s. He made his way into Kfar Aza, was saving lives, made a makeshift team of people who were inside of the kibbutz itself, started rescuing people. You have
also the Nova Festival. That area, really, the police officers were there.
Yeah.
They were there when it was happening. They were trying to understand, trying to help people. They saved people. What can you tell us about that?
You have to remember that the Israel police, it's not an army. Right. Though we deal with counterterrorism and we deal with arriving first to the scene in terror attacks that happened throughout Israel. On October 7th, the Israel police were located at the Nova Music Festival in the Re'im Forest. They were there simply for order. For traffic order. The officers were working off-duty shifts, and at about 6:30 in the morning, the officers were coming to actually change shifts from the overnight shift to the new shift. And so you had approximately 40 officers that were there. These officers, once the rockets came in, they decided, listen, we're shutting down the party. And that's a huge decision because to us, looking back at it, we're thinking, okay, of course they're going to shut down a party. It's rockets, this and that. There's legal consideration to shut down a party. They're going to get sued. They don't know terrorists are coming. They say, forget it. We'll take the risk. We're shutting down the party. As they're directing people to leave, and we're talking about thousands of people, participants of this party, young partygoers, to leave, waking some of them up who had been drinking, some of them who had been sleeping at 6:30 in the morning. They all of a sudden hear that there's gunshots and people are coming back. And so the officers split up. Half of them are trying to get civilians to safety. The other half are going down to Road 232, which was basically a bottleneck because the terrorists had stopped the cars coming at the Be'eri junction and also at the Re'im junction. Right. So everybody's coming back. Now the terrorists are starting to come in. You have terrorists coming from above on their Buckeyes, on the motorized paragliders. and the police officers are battling with handguns against terrorists who have AK-47s, machine guns mounted onto their trucks, and they could have just left. They have families. They could have gone back home. They could have said, forget this. This is what's happening here. What's happening over where my family is.
Many of them are residents of the area.
Yeah, of course. These are police officers who live in the district.
Many perished.
And they battled until the last bullet in their gun. They kept going. You have others that made it to safety. You have Igal Zinger that I met in the hospital, who was sitting there with his wife. He's the father to 2 boys. You have Remo Elazael. You have so many officers who their only regret that day was that they couldn't go back and rescue more people.
Now, as we spoke also with other organizations, also the Israel police have to deal with the trauma, with strengthening these police officers who the next day have to continue with their work, and also work that is relevant to this war.
Yep.
And that's also a challenge, right?
Yeah, the Israel police opened up a program where we had our police officers go through basically a resilience seminar, because it's traumatizing. Think about it. The officers who were battling that day, they were collecting bodies of their own friends and taking them to Shura, where they were identifying them. Wow. They were hearing of their loved ones who were killed. They were they were seeing things that no human should see. And yet, today they continue their mission. And they do it out of love. I say it all the time. The Israel police officers, they don't do it for the money. Mm-hmm. They don't do it for the respect. They do it for the love of the country, the love of keeping the civilians safe, the community safe, because no other person wakes up in the morning saying, you know what, I might take a bullet, but they have to have some kind of love, some kind of DNA in them to say, I want to protect.
It's important to remember, because really as Israel, as the nation, as the country, really the nation throughout the world, we know of our soldiers, and that's part of our legacy. But sometimes we may forget about the police officers, and it's tragic that we're talking following such a tragedy and such a war, but it's important to remember that we have these brave police officers throughout the country.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about resilience, we're talking about revival, so let's just end with a good word. Tu B'Shvat, revival. How are you feeling on this day as part of the Israel police?
I can tell you that I'm feeling proud of my officers, all of them, not just the ones that fell. It doesn't take officers falling to be called a hero. Mm-hmm. We should be calling them a hero every single day. Mm-hmm. Arnon Zamora, many people think he's from the IDF, but the Imam, the Israel Police Counterterrorism Unit, you have these names where you're like, that's why I put on this uniform. And people, they call him a hero. I see all of our officers as a hero, and we're going to keep doing everything possible to defend our civilians no matter what.
Okay, Dean Elsdun, International Spokesperson of Israel Police, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
you.
Good luck.
We're continuing our broadcast. I'd like to invite Rabbi Avi Berman. We'll need another chair as well, please, guys. Rabbi Avi Berman, Executive Director of OU Israel, and Keren Haush, resident of Sderot and former OU Israel Teen Center Advisor. It's kind of windy here, but we'll deal with it. Rabbi Berman, please. Thank you very much for joining us. We got one microphone working here in this windy day, so Rabbi Berman will say shalom to you.
Shalom to you.
And I will want to begin with Keren, because we do want to talk about this day. Keren, thank you very much for joining us. October 7th, as we begin every interview this day. Tell us about that day, Simchat Torah. Such a sacred day, such a day of happiness. Tell us a bit about that.
So, as you said, it's such a happy Chag. We woke up at 6:30, like everyone, with a large amount of rockets.
More than regular. It's hard for some people to comprehend this regular, but yeah.
Yeah.
And you still right away you understood that it was something different than normal again?
Yes. It was one after the other. We have an alarm which is called Tseva Adom, and it was like over and over for over 10 minutes.
Wow.
My husband was in Tfilat Vatikin in the yeshiva.
An early prayer, wow.
Yeah. So he wasn't even home. I was pregnant. And I just closed the mamad, the door, and I was waiting for him to come. I didn't think that there was going to be any shooting, and I was waiting, and as he came home at around 10 to 7 in the morning, we hear shooting right right when he was like coming in the door, we hear shooting, and then I
so first of all, we have to understand he got home,
yeah,
and he could have met terrorists on the way.
He saw on the way
some sort
weird
of vehicle.
things. Yeah, he saw like tenderim, the cars that the mechabrim came with, and he didn't understand anything, and he was running under rocket attack.
He was running.
Yeah.
Wow.
So once he came home, I told him, take your phone and look at it right now. And his face said everything. Like, it was just...
Terrorists in the city.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, you go into the shelter when there's rockets. Do you know what to do, or is there true fear at that point that terrorists might come in the door?
You try to believe that not, but when you mind switch to survival mode, anything is relevant. I feel like that's the feeling. We just put furniture on the doors. We brought water because I was pregnant. We didn't have any food because the food was we were supposed to eat by his cousin. But we brought crackers, like anything that you could think. We brought because we didn't know when it's going to end.
Really, how many hours were you in that situation?
30 hours.
30 hours. And did you also ask yourself, where is the IDF? Where's the Air Force?
Always. I, in the very beginning, I brought my husband to the bed, and I told him, we sat on the bed, and I told him, I'm going to say Shema Israel.
Wow.
I'm going to say a vidui that every Jewish says before they die. And you say it, and you also think about, all the youth that I'm working with. You think, wait, what about them? What about the what they're going through? Not every kid has a normal, family or parent. They don't know what to do. It was very scary. Our minds are there with them.
Wow. Now, we'll continue with the story in a moment. Rabbi Berman, now we're hearing this story. It's just one of so many stories. You weren't in that area, but for you, what do you remember from those days? Understanding that we're under attack, and this is something we've never experienced in the past.
Well, first of all, it's seeing your own children, your neighbors all being called up, maher, to put on your uniform, seeing if they have a couple minutes to get an aliyah from the Torah before going out to battle.
Wow.
And just thinking, oh my gosh, Yom Kippur war. But from the moment that Simchat Torah was over, first thing I did was called Guy Nagar, who's our director of our program here, lives in Kfar Darom, and talking to him while he's whispering to me.
He was still whispering.
Still whispering. Motzei Shabbat, Motzei Simchat Torah, he was still whispering, as was Karen, as was all the staff. Karen didn't talk about the fact that she's crawling on the floor, 7 months pregnant. This way nobody sees her in the window to be able to go to the bathroom. Again and again, and nobody has to understand. Imagine what it is to be pregnant 7 months when you're in the safe room. But talking to my staff, and each one's telling me, my boys are standing here with knives in case the terrorists come into our house. Karen's husband telling me that he made the bracha already to die on Kiddush Hashem with God's name because he saw the terrorists already at the entrance to his house. And they tried to get in, and in some miraculous way, they didn't come in. And then slowly starting to hear about the fact that we have students of ours, teens in our teen centers in Sderot, that their father was killed, the brother was killed, the sister was killed. And realizing that, oh my gosh, and I was on the phone till very, very late on Motzei Simchat Torah. And then we just started working on getting our staff out of where they were. Karen was able to get out with an ambulance because she literally was, feeling contractions. But getting each staff member out, and then our teens out, and trying to figure out how we're dealing with each one.
Karen, let's just go back a bit to the story. So you were afraid that they were coming in, and you feel, looking back, that it was a miracle that they didn't.
Yes, it was a miracle. I always think about a week before that it was Yom Kippur, and everyone has their own book, and I really felt like my story is for life. So it's whoever goes to life and whoever
not to life.
didn't.
And when did you stop, and when were you able to comprehend what was going on? Because you mentioned you were in survival mode and you were taken out by ambulance. When did you look back and understand and take a breath for a moment and understand what was going on?
In the same day?
Yeah. When did you stop and comprehend?
I think only when Shabbos came out.
Next Shabbat.
Yeah. I think that I remember watching the news and I was like, what's going on? And as I'm listening to the news, I hear shooting and bombing outside my window, which is crazy. I really felt like I didn't know what's going on. The news were right outside of our window, so it was like they were explaining to me what's going on outside.
Now, as a community, and you mentioned your connection with the young boys and girls there, as a community, what can you tell us about the way the community coped, the way you helped as part of your activity, you and other people there helped the community, strengthen the community in these difficult days?
You mean like today?
In terms of the teens, so throughout the year and a half, yes.
First of all, I think a few days after, people started going to the hotels, and right when that started, Rav Avi brought all the staff, and really he had a really good care for them. We really also reached to all the kids, to all the families, took them to pizza, to movie, to just relax.
Try to give them some sort of
normal
life.
Yeah, normal
and
life.
It's very important for people to understand. People here, they went to a hotel. Very, very difficult, very, very challenging. Maybe 1 day, 2 days, it could be a feeling of some sort of luxurious or something, but it's very, very difficult taking someone from their home, even if it's the hotel, right? It's important to understand that.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to also not be home and to go to different places and not to feel like you're in one place.
Also, understanding that you were kicked out of your home or you
Yeah.
left your home because of a terrible.
Yeah, it is very hard.
attack.
It's hard for the youth today. They feel not stable. They feel always scared. Even with all the help, you can't help with the safe situation in all Sderot.
Now, that's in terms of the community, Rabbi Berman. Let's talk really about the nation. And the nation is coping. We've been through a lot. We've been through war. We don't know where we're holding at this point. Lots of heroism, bravery. And the nation is going through something. How do you look at it?
I just came back last night from the United States, where I spent time meeting with many people, men and women, that came on different OU missions throughout the past year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
Standing with them literally in this location, as well as many other locations across the South, whether it's the Nova or it's Sderot, standing and hearing Karen's story and Liav's story and so many other stories of people that literally gave the lives of their most dearest, and fought so hard in order to make sure that we'll be able to continue on. And then you see the endless appreciation that Jews around the world have for each and every one of them. And you're talking about a situation where you're standing in shul, and it makes no difference. I'm speaking in shuls all over North America.
Mm-hmm.
And you stand up in shul, and you're giving over the simple messages that teenagers in our teen centers are asking me. Please go. First of all, give them a hug. Thank them that tell them that every time they come, to Israel, every time they come to Sderot, every time they think they just bought a few candies in the makolet and they gave it to us, they think it's something small. It's not small at all. Tell them that whenever we're a soldier and we come and we see, American protein bars or American granola bars, and there's a little heart on it. Love Jews from Los Angeles or love Jews from St. Louis.
The heart is more than the chocolate.
The heart is so much more than the chocolate. I just make sure it has an OU on it.
Of course.
But they talk about the meaning that the hug that they're getting from Klal Yisrael around the world means to them, and I'm hearing it again and again and again. Here, I was just talking to Karen. She went to Ohio with her husband to talk in No Yeshul over there, and she's still in touch. She's showing me pictures from last week. They came to Israel, they came to Sderot, they came to give her a hug.
Wow.
It's bonding that is happening amongst the Jewish people that we have not seen in a long, long time. And last week we did a Chanukat Habayit of the new offices of the OU.
Israel, in Jerusalem.
And Liav and Chani, Chani lost her husband, Liav lost his father. He's a student of ours in our teen center. He walks into my office with a big closed box. And I say, Maze, what is this? So Chani tells me, this is a matana for you. I said, okay, thank you. She says, open it. They gave me this big, gigantic glass frame to put on my wall. And what is it? Mizmor Kuf, Mizmor Toda.
Toda, gratitude.
And he's saying, here's a lady who lost her husband, a 16-year-old boy that lost his father. And they're coming and telling me what we have to do is say thank you. Thank you to God. Thank you to the Jewish people. Thank you to the soldiers. Thank you to the families of those that have lost their loved ones or that have chatufim inside Gaza, because they're literally giving the most dearest for the Jewish people. And the fact that we're able to stand and say Mizmor Todah, to say thank you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you stand here, you see what happened. But still, look at the amount of miracles that are happening to the Jewish people. Look, the fact that we're planting a forest here. The fact that this place is going to blossom. The fact that everybody's taking a plant from here and planting it across the country. And we're filling up the country with flowers. It shows that Klal Yisrael, this is not something new that we went through a hard time. But moving on. We're able to pick ourselves up and move to the next stage.
Karen, finally, a few words really about... You're back in Sderot, right?
Yeah, I also want to add what Rabbi Berman said, that when we were in the hotel, there was such chesed from the OU. You know what the feeling is to
from
get...
From around the world.
Yeah,
wow.
the donations. You know what a good feeling is it to get a new sweater or new clothes or a new toothbrush, like any new things and not used things, like a used sweater or used clothes.
It's significant.
It just made us feel so, not just for me, for the whole people of Sderot, for the youth, for the it just made a good feeling.
So now as you're back in Sderot, and we're talking about Tu B'Shvat, a day of revival, of growing, of flourishing, how do you connect to this day?
Wow, so many. I connect to this day with a lot of emunah in the youth. Mm-hmm. Yeah, faith with the youth of Sderot and the generation that's going to come from this.
Wow, it's on them.
Yeah, it's hard now and it's struggling, but you see how the kids are stronger. Even though it maybe seems like it's lower and doesn't seem like that, but there's a lot more of emunah and a lot more of chozek, like
and their parents and their grandparents need them. I understand that it's also they feel that it's on them. And as teenagers of Sderot, I'm hearing so many stories of how they're the ones, they understand that it's on them to pick up and to strengthen their community. I want to say thank you very much, Rabbi Rabbi Avi Berman, Executive Director, OU Israel, Karen Arush, resident of Sderot, former OU Israel Teen Center advisor. Rabbi Berman, let's end with a vort, as we say, a few words. for Tu B'Shvat?
I think the most beautiful thing of this time of year, especially Tu B'Shvat, is when you walk with your children and you see in the street all these trees. You see them right here. They look dead. Mamash dead. It's a branch. There's nothing left. And you tell your kid, listen, this same walk that we're doing now, we're going to do it in 2 weeks. And in 2-3 weeks, we're going to see this tree again. Right now, you think, I'm giving up on it.
And right, and some ask, so why don't we mark Tu B'Shvat when our trees are blossoming around Pesach?
Because Tu B'Shvat is about understanding
Faith.
that we have to believe in what's inside. Okay? When working with teenagers, right? Karen does not succeed with working with teenagers because she doesn't see what's inside them. She doesn't look at the outside and say, look how he's dressed, I'm giving up on him. But she's looking at the teenager and saying, wow, look at what this kid is going to be in 10 years from now, in 20 years from now. And that's this time of year. It's looking at trees and saying, there's so much. Just in 3 weeks, we're going to see thousands of leaves on every single tree. Where are those leaves now?
But now we're marking Tu
They're
B'Shvat.
inside. That's what we're marking it.
Rabbi Berman, Karen Arush, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to all our viewers for joining us for this special broadcast here from the Center of Burnt Vehicles from October 7th. This broadcast is part of the activity of the Ministry of Heritage and the Israel Government Tourist Corporation. Thank you very much for joining us. Tu B'Shvat Sameach.